Welcome back to Derry Public Radio. Reporting from the basement of the Derry Civic Center, this is CM Alexander with the news. Parents of Derry, are your children acting strangely, even by Derry standards? Are they showing up to dinner with new cuts and bruises? Are their clothes torn? Pockets full of pebbles? It could mean they're members of Rock Fight Club. And as we all know, the first rule of Rock Fight Club is, there's rocks. You are listening to Derry Public Radio. This is Derry Public Radio. Hey everyone, CM Alexander here real quick just to let you guys know that we had an audio issue with Ben's track that did not get resolved until about 45 minutes or so into the episode. We were able to save his dialogue, so you will still hear what Ben has to say, but it's going to sound a little different for a majority of the episode. So sorry about that.
Welcome back to Derry Public Radio, a bi-weekly Stephen King Book Club podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Joshua Kahn, alongside CM Alexander.
Hello, everyone.
And Benjamin Graham.
What's up, constant readers?
Today's a special day. You know why, guys?
It's special?
It is, because today is our 100th episode.
What?
Yay!
Celebrating episode 100. So I couldn't just let this milestone go by. So I planned a little something special. We're going to have a faux champagne toast, thanks to studio engineer Devin Alexander. Studio engineer Devin Alexander, would you bring in the fake champaign, please?
I sure would.
Burst through the
That's so aggressive.
What's wrong, you guys? Yeah.
All right.
Happy 100th episode, everybody. Mr. Ben Graham.
If you have watched our
Hello,
streams and stuff,
Alexander.
you've heard Devin Alexander's voice a couple times, or a few of our live shows. So I wanted all four of us in the room together for a quick toast. I struggled all day trying to decide what to say for this moment because it's important. And I couldn't imagine being here when we first started this, had no idea what we're doing. Now we've done it for 3 years, and we have a better idea of what we're doing, but we're still us. by which I mean I feel like a lot of times when you spend so long doing the same thing, it can become mechanical. It can become going through the motions. And I just want to say that I'm glad that that's not been us. If anything, we've become more ourselves as the show's gone on. And that's represented in the listener emails that we've gotten about people being grateful for the perspectives we have and that kind of thing.
I thought you were going to say it's evidenced by our boner talk.
by how those segments have become extremely popular. Yeah. It's been a long 3 years. We've all had life upheavals happen to us. We've been through a lot of stuff together off mic, but we've all done it together. And I just want to say I appreciate you guys, and cheers to 100 more episodes.
Aw, thanks.
Cheers.
L'chaim, everyone.
Clink. These are plastic
They're
glasses.
plastic.
Oh, wait. Guys, I completely forgot.
I already drank.
No,
That's not a problem.
No, it's not a problem, because I have a surprise for you guys.
Wait, what?
Yeah, a 100th episode gift. So, studio engineer Devin Alexander, could you take it away, please?
Taking it away.
I have this thing where I think movies should, the title of every movie should be its best line of dialogue. My classic example is the movie You've Got Mail should be called Hello, It's Mr. Nasty. Rock, hop, it's Porky's, but everyone dies. Let me
Are ghosts dumb?
Daddy Daddy.
This is the title of every
Send me
episode.
$500.
Can I unwatch this?
Not my balls, not my leech. Round keeps a strumpet.
Mr. Picklock?
Must be nice. Podcast over. Doing the do.
Home Alone.
Terror comes from the tongue.
Delicious foreshadowing creature versus magician.
The mayor is a Bigfoot.
You go, Italian ghost.
Fine, I give up.
Who's
Two
the
people love
baby's
each
mama? I regret that. Nature Club.
Potato accident. Slamming Bud Light. Ben Richards 316. Performatively woke. Hitting the reset button. Lovers in the nighttime.
They're cool, right? I second it.
Deus touches the mocking. Business in the front. Evil in the back.
The glory shot.
In-
Kala Chameleon.
Ducks can't read. Book weirdo.
Canadian fiance.
Chambray shorts.
Psychology.
Since he's my father's name.
Chicken exploded. I'm always pretty around.
Oh, Josh, Fresh Prince.
Yes.
Of Bel Air.
Boner talk?
Ectogasm. Hissy feet.
Tall and blonde. But dick.
The Kingdom Finger. CM Alexander, Queen of Transitions.
Looks porn.
It's a nepotism thing.
Nancy Drews.
Helicopter blades.
The Curse.
I'm a hoot.
WCW saved us all. Freestyle nursery rhyming.
Tinnitus.
I'm getting a dog.
Classic book argument.
Just like the Matrix.
Dark place.
That very poetic image. Please no one murder CM. He's doing what to her? Just got likey. Rice is the Calvin and High explosive.
A real duology
Nothing
chick.
beat the penis.
The Marston House of Cars. 1000% porn. The plan is to nothing.
Real gross.
Everything is gross.
Apple fondness. The wetter the better.
Bachman invented road handies.
Eldritch horror of beauty.
The top of the tummy.
Do you know what this means?
Baby would be
Body
a terrible shield.
Two brothers kissing.
Humans at the handle. Show me a
another
weird
level.
thing. Do you side with the Borg?
Oh,
Oh, my cousin!
Do nothing.
Great butthole.
Perpetual lens of sadness. Too horny for terror.
Fantastic.
God, I love that. Aw. Did you and Devin make that?
Yeah.
How long had
Wow.
that taken?
I went through every episode and I listened to them all until I found the line. Or some of them I very clearly remembered where the line was.
Oh,
and went and
jeez.
found it and I pulled it all, sent it to Devin, and he put it all to music.
That's the kind of self-indulgent bullshit that I love.
We should put that on our Patreon.
That's fantastic. Happy 100 episodes, you guys.
Yeah, happy 100th. We're 100 years old.
It only feels that way sometimes. So now that the celebration's over, let's get to the book because I'm very excited to talk about this section. So as you know, we are continuing our coverage of It from our Patreon selection from Rachel Jansen, and we are covering chapters 10 through 13 with CM leading our discussion.
Thanks,
CM,
Josh. Sorry. Go ahead. Say your thing.
CM, take it away.
Thanks, Josh. I was just so excited. Okay, last episode we focused a lot on our characters' childhood experiences with it and more of the blossoming adolescence.
This is what happens when we break form.
I
At
know.
any moment, we are such a well-oiled machine.
We had that champagne.
Sparkling Welch's gets me
Yep.
every time. Okay, more friendship stuff between our characters, and it's amazing every time. And we get a lot of Derry history through Mike and his family. And now we get to kick things off with the reunion of everyone but Stan. And we're going to start with Bill getting a wake-up phone call from Mike to set up a lunch date with all of them at the Jade of the Orient. And this is where I totally forgot that we know Stan is dead, and Mike knows, but our gang doesn't know yet.
That's tough. This is also, I don't know what it is about this scene, but both times when I've seen it in the adaptations, my brain goes, oh, that's a part they made up for the movie. I forget the Jade of the Orient stuff
Yeah.
ever happens.
Also interesting, we get to catch up with Derry as it is now through Bill's eyes as he takes the most king cab ride there ever was ever.
Ben, what's your take on that catchphrase?
Oh, my lord. This cabbie. What is it? I purged it from my memory.
Pardon my French if you're a religious man.
Right. They say it 300 times throughout this cab ride every time he swears. Pardon my French. And Bill he starts paraphrasing or
He says it even when he doesn't swear. I swear he says it.
I don't know. I blocked this cab ride from my memory.
Yeah.
Because I knew what was coming up, and
Mhm.
I wanted to get away from this one king character.
There were just a few parts about the cab ride that I kind of liked. Bill's childhood memories that were starting to surface as he was doing this. References to things that we haven't really gotten yet, but it's like, ooh, we can look forward to figuring out what this story is all about, hopefully. His feelings about Derry itself being really cold and hard. And then there's also a line in there, another real King moment, about Bowers, Huggins, and Chris. Oh my. But they were being used as a tool to push all of our main characters together. And you don't often think of those three as anything useful or remotely positive. So it's like, that's an interesting spin to put on that. But yeah, I buy it.
Yeah, they talk a lot in this section that we read today about predetermination. They talk a lot about how they feel that they are not really active participants in anything that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
It is something far greater than them pulling the strings, not just of the Losers Club, but as we see later, secondary characters as well.
And pulling the strings cruelly and harshly without regard, because these three put, as we're going to find out, put our main characters through so much. And it gave me chills because it's like, oh, that, and we do that to ourselves all the time. Like, well, this happened for a reason. Maybe if I hadn't gotten into that horrible accident, I would have run afoul of an axe murderer later that day.
I feel like this is a theme that we've talked about before on the show, of King saying that these things that are pretty terrible that happen in his books are fated to happen. And I don't know how I feel about it. It kind of makes this book really depressing for our heroes.
It's very religious, and I think there's a lot more religious parallels in King's work than we often give credit to even. I mean, in things like Revival and The Stand, it was more overt. But this kind of illustrates King's, I feel like, beliefs about faith and fate and a higher power sort of orchestrating things. It's really interesting.
Well, I think it sends the message that destiny can take you so far. Destiny will give you your best chance at doing the impossible, but it's not going to guarantee victory.
Yeah.
And that's what I think it all comes down to, is because I feel like when you say something is destiny, it takes away the achievement a little bit in the end. And that's why I think that a lot of this story is destiny putting the pieces there, because bringing these 7 together as children is the only thing that is going to level the board to give them a chance. Once they have the chance, that's up to them.
Cold and hard, just like Derry.
Yeah.
Another sad thing when Bill gets to the restaurant, he's the last one to arrive and Mike's in the lobby area waiting for him. Right here and then further into the lunch too, we come to understand that leaving Derry has definitely made a mark on these other 6 individuals beyond them losing their memories. They are all doing really well, like we talked about in the first episode when we were getting to know them. And Mike, it's also had its effects on him physically, emotionally, financially.
Mike should be the hero of this book.
Yes.
He is fucking shafted so hard.
Yep.
Because he's the watchman. He is left in Derry to suffer. Well, he has a fine life, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But when compared to the ones that got out, it is unfair.
Well, in everyone's defense, Mike even says, it's not your guys' fault you left. Your parents moved. You were still children when you all left. So I'm not mad at you. Yeah. It's just he very clearly points out how well everybody is doing, even if they hadn't quite noticed it yet. Because everybody's remembering each other in a way that no one's addressing, hey, I didn't remember you 5 days ago, but here are some memories. Like, Bev hands Bill the book, and he's like, this was just purchased in a gift shop. He doesn't know it's because she just ran and left all her belongings behind. But even then, it's an indicator of, you didn't even know who I was.
Yeah, this isn't a fan thing.
Yeah.
This is oh, yeah, my friend Bill is famous. I better grab an autograph.
Right.
It's interesting though, because this moment that we're about to walk into with Bill carries so much weight with it because of the way this book is organized, which we've talked about a lot so far. Because it's organized so well, they barely remember each other, but we have seen all these things. So coming into this private dining area with Bill, where he's about to see them and he's nervous, that moment, I just felt all of that with him. It was so cool.
And it does it goes so far in establishing their immediate connection.
Yeah.
Because when he walks in, there's this split second of like everyone staring at each other and there's this silence. But then immediately they all fall back into their roles. Richie goofing around and Eddie being mad about it. And Bill being, well, soon to be their leader once Mike
Lays everything out
lays
and
everything out
yeah.
and everything.
Let's talk a little bit more about the reunion. Just any part that you guys, I mean, until the end when they're about to leave, any part that really stuck out that you guys really liked. A lot happens here, but there's so much more story.
Yeah, there's so much.
I was sad when they all, well, not all of them, mostly it was Eddie and Bev lied about their lives.
Yeah. It's interesting to have the conversation because we've talked about it so much of the fact that the child mortality rate in this town is so high, and Mike laying out that it keeps the news from noticing. And we get that scope of we finally get the definitive answer here that yes, that is the case.
Mm-hmm.
The part that really got me is when he passes around the picture of Georgie.
All of the parallels between what happened then and what's going on now, like all the clues that I feel like it's leaving for Mike to say, yeah, I'm back, buddy.
Well, and so, man, I don't remember if this is something or not, so I'm just gonna put it out here because it's been so long since I've read this. We talked about how they're all very successful and rich and everything, and Mike says that them being that way and none of them having kids is a result of what happened here. This is the cause of why you're all in the same position. And the first thing that came to mind was, man, this is a great way to make sure they never come back. They leave and using whatever mystical forces give them an incredibly successful life, give them no kids to remind them of their childhood. So they as almost as though it did that for them to make sure they never come back. But then we have this taunting bringing them back. Yeah. So those two things are conflicting, but I feel like maybe that was a plan to keep them away long enough for it to finally be ready to take vengeance.
I saw it as it knows that they're going to come back because their watchman is still here and he's going to bring them back no matter what. So to set up these taunts makes it seem like he's not afraid of them and he's like ready and waiting.
So do you think if Mike left that Mike would have also been successful and they all just would have?
Yeah, I don't think it would have drawn them back. They would have had to have been drawn back by a different force.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's interesting that you think that the force that made them all successful is it and not some machination of the turtle. Because it's possible the turtle gave them this success to keep them safe because the turtle knew eventually they would have to come back.
See, I thought about that, and the reason I stepped away from it is because of the negative aspects of, say, Bev and Eddie's lives, that I feel like if this was a gift, that they all would have had equivalent of like Bill's life and Stan's life, where they were all very happy. And maybe the turtle is the reason why they didn't all remember as fast as Stan did, so they all didn't end up like Stan.
I attributed their success to something else completely than either of those things.
Interesting.
Because I think this came
Hard
from...
work picking themselves up.
No, jeez. No. This came from Stan's part about... I don't believe in bootstraps, man. You know that. About having this intuition that has created so much success for him and his wife. And I feel like because they were all different and they all had the ability to stand up to it, that's something, I guess you could call it magical. That's the white in them. And I think the white is still with them after they left as adults, and they didn't have an evil force to pit that against, so that's manifesting as personal growth and success instead.
All possible.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
All right, let's move on to when they are about to wrap up and they get...
For one, I'm always happy when I get my fortune cookie full of teeth.
And
God.
I love getting my fortune cookie and immediately biting into it.
Yeah, that's very weird.
So they all get fortune cookies, and as they're passing them around, the waitress is still in the room, but immediately, who is it that breaks it open first?
Beverly.
Bev. It sprays blood. It bursts open, and blood flies everywhere. And one of them thinks, thank God she didn't bite into it like any of us should have. What? How do you eat a fortune cookie?
Not once in my life have I ever bitten straight into a fortune
No.
cookie. There's something in there.
Oh, one more thing. Can I gush a moment about the part of the book where Bill is acknowledging the seventh presence in the room?
Yes.
I thought
wanted
this-
to talk about this.
Okay, yeah, I thought this was really cool because he's looking at all of them, thinking about what their lives must have been like, and he's suddenly aware of the seventh presence. And despite Stan not being there with them, Bill thinks that presence is it. It and time are interchangeable, and it wore all the faces of the kids it killed, but it also wore theirs, and it might also be them, which kind of supports, Josh, what you were saying a minute ago about their success. But that section is one of the more covertly scary parts of this book.
Yeah, it speaks to what the theme of the whole book is, which is what I wanted to get you guys' opinion on.
Mm-hmm.
Because it seems to me that what it's saying is that the real villain of the book is time itself. Growing up is the scary thing here.
That's not wrong.
Right?
Growing up makes you weaker. It's all you can't access that innocent magic inside you that you had as a kid. You can't throw sneezing powder at a werewolf and believe it'll work as an adult. That doesn't happen. And so, yeah, I think that's interesting that you get further and further away from the quote unquote strongest you'll ever be.
Man, I can't wait till I'm old, though. It sounds so much better.
I am right there with you. I could throw sneezing powder at a werewolf. If a werewolf ever shows up, I'm going to immediately be like, oh, well, all rules are off. I don't need a ritual of chud. I'm just going to be like, oh, yeah, I need silver. If one crazy thing happens, then all crazy things, I'm in.
I would beg it to scratch me so I could be a werewolf, too. Why'd you guys laugh at that? Why would you wouldn't want to be a werewolf?
You are
All
so
monsters.
polite.
Yeah, it does not fit your steez.
Yeah.
Maybe I'd be a different kind of werewolf.
As much as the werewolf life attracts you, you are definitely a vampire.
Oh, I would leave everything behind to be a vampire. Sorry, guys.
No, I take it back. You're a ghost. You're a poltergeist.
Aw.
And I'm a Wendigo.
Can I posit something?
Yes.
And I am desperately going to try to keep this cohesive. It's about Stan again, because reading through just their exchange during this restaurant scene, even though they don't remember ultimately what they did yet, they do know that they were forever changed by whatever happened. And when I was reading this section, I was thinking about how powerful their bond is and their promise, because these are complete strangers woken up by a phone call who are willing to uproot their lives, not even really understanding why, to make good on a promise they can't remember. And that made me feel really sad about Stan, because I feel like, and maybe the book addresses this, but it's been a few years since I've gone through it too. Stan's death was made to seem like it was out of fear because he couldn't handle returning to Derry and facing it again. But I think the weight of their promise is what killed him. It's so powerful that he felt like if he couldn't make good on this promise, that death was the only option. Because Bill's opinion on Stan's death is that it was about fear. He couldn't come back, all of that. If that was the case, he could have just said, no, I'm sorry, I can't make it. I have a life here. Or he could have made up some excuse, or he could have said sure and then not showed up. But I think he didn't want to disappoint them. And he knew that his refusal to return would be a completely different thing than his inability to return because he was dead. Like, I think that he knew it would weaken their circle. You know, it broke their circle not having him, but it would be even more damage if he just didn't come back because, and I don't want to glamorize suicide, so I hope that doesn't sound like that, but did I make any sense?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. I don't know. I see it's the matter again of predetermination. I didn't think of it that much because it had the echo of when he was a boy cutting all of their hands. Mm-hmm. Him cutting himself. It has this symmetry to it.
Right, like all the other things at the crime scenes, yeah.
Exactly. I just assumed once again, whatever force this is that is pulling everything, pulling the strings, as Josh said, it can be cruel. I honestly think he was just part of the sacrifice. Mm-hmm. His death was, for whatever mystical reason, necessary.
So I'm going to reserve the right to change my opinion after we get to, because I remember this argument being something that was brought up. They talk about it in It Chapter 2, and I remember when they mentioned it, I was like, bullshit, at the screen. I was very upset.
I don't remember that.
That argument almost upsets me in a way that I think, just because I think that it does, in a way, glamorize Stan's choice. I honestly think it is just as simple as how they talk about Stan being neat and clean. And as an adult, I think because he is so, I'd say he's the most analytical of all the losers. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's partially why I think Stan remembered everything. I think Stan got it all almost right away because that uncleanness immediately made him think of the sewers. Thinking of the sewers brought all that in there, and I think he couldn't handle it. And that's what I think. And I think the scrawling on the wall was in hopes that it would come back to them rather than leaving an innocuous thing like goodbye or something like that. That is a message to them that is saying, I'm sorry, it was too much. I cannot do it.
Mm-hmm. That's so bleak.
It really is.
But you've actually, no, I agree with you. Damn it.
It was a good thought, Sam.
No, and I did feel like I get why that could cross the line, and maybe it walks right up to it or does cross it, of glamorizing suicide.
It's a very glass half full perspective, and I wish that I had that idea before my idea, but I think it's just because this idea has been ingrained in me since the first time I read it, and that's why I hold that feeling so true.
Yeah.
And maybe if this was my first time reading it and we were having this discussion, I might be more open or swayed to it.
I guess I didn't realize how much, and I think it's because I've read so many King things about, Ka and destiny and the circle forming. It hurts me that their circle is broken.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
And it seems, what's the word I'm looking for? Blasphemous almost, that Stan's place, Bill thinks Pennywise is taking it, like, in this room.
Yeah.
It seems so like, oh, no. Mm-hmm. You need your friends, but...
Yeah.
Also, I think losing Stan is, for the book, it is to stack the deck against the losers. Mm-hmm. Because if you have the entire team that won last time, good chance they can pull together and win again. But now these people who barely were victorious the first time now are a man down.
Yeah, they've lost someone before.
Yeah, this puts them it puts them back in a can't win scenario, like they were when they were kids when they believed they couldn't win.
Okay, so we mentioned that Mike brings them all up to speed, and he basically asks, do you guys want to move forward, or are we all going to try to defeat this thing again? And I liked that Bill acknowledges, well, when I was a kid, it wasn't about the greater good. It wasn't about what it was doing. It was about Georgie. But now he doesn't have that. But it's just these kids that are dying, and he's like, yeah, now it's for them. Let's go. And I thought that brought Bill back to us a little bit better.
That was the transition point, because there's this point where he looks at Mike and can feel that this is the point where Mike is handing over the reins to him. Because while Mike has been in town taking point, he recognizes that Bill is still Big Bill, and he needs to be their leader.
You would think that calling him Big Bill as adults would be off-putting, but like, objectively speaking, but the way they all call him that is so endearing.
Yeah.
And it's so great. I love it.
I also thought it was interesting we're having these conversations about what is it? What is Derry? Like, what is Derry on its own? And even though it's been hibernating, something, and maybe it's just what things like this have done to the soil of Derry, but something's protecting the town because there's no national coverage. I think you mentioned that earlier, Josh. Even though it's not up and about, it seems like Derry's protecting something, or there's still some power there that's kind of wrapping things up and keeping things on course. Okay, so Mike suggests, as they're taking off, that they each go off by themselves and just see what happens, because that's, they were all alone and then brought together, so he feels like we need that parallel. Do you think that since he's the one who remembers the most of what happened, is that an irresponsible thing to tell them to do?
This whole plan seems so foolhardy, because Mike is literally just go. Just wander around aimlessly. It is not only foolhardy because there is an immortal, possibly monster hunting them. And he even says, he's like, there's a possibility when we meet up tonight, some of us won't show. Like, there's a possibility some of us will die today.
Or take off.
Or take off.
If you don't die.
Right. But also because they are 5 strangers in a town with a bunch of child murders.
Yeah. Bill really approaches that line.
God.
I kept thinking it all, him and Ben to a lesser degree.
Yes.
Because he does act like a real weirdo in the
Terrible lies about having a kid.
Yeah,
that's the most suspicious.
So the whole plan seems like not a great idea.
I get it in the way that if they're following the same train of thought, Stan remembered too quick, that's what it is. Go to the place that'll jog your memories. I also think that it's because the one place they all have in common is the Barrens, and that's the one place Mike says, don't go. Go anywhere but the Barrens. The Barrens is last. And it's because they all have to remember, they all have to get that strength back. And I feel like it's risky if you all go together. Richie goes to the Paul Bunyan statue. None of the rest of them have any connection to the Paul Bunyan statue. So that does nothing for anybody but Richie. And then does that make your belief less effective because you're supporting a friend who's remembering something as opposed to remembering something yourself?
I see what you're saying.
Sure. It's the fastest way to get everybody close to their most powerful they can be, because I don't remember how this adult side, because it jumps back and forth. I don't remember the timeline between when they have this dinner and when they go into battle. I don't remember how long that is.
Yeah, me neither. Okay, well, we'll find out more, I guess. First stop is the library with Ben. Would one of you like to talk about his reunion with it?
It's pretty great. Ben lies about having a kid to a junior high girl, which is not suspicious at all. I just really like that the girl is also like, what's his name? What's he look like? And he's just like, still. He just is so fucking great. Yeah, there are child murderers. You're a stranger in the children's section
Clearly
of the library.
Lying about knowing a child.
Gives his own name and then immediately goes to get a library card.
Yeah.
It's all it would have taken was that for that library aide to wander over and be like, "Oh, getting a library card for your son."
Yeah. It appears he's on the ground floor, and there's like, is he on the racks or is he in? He's like upstairs.
He's upstairs.
Yeah, and it appears with empty eye sockets, which is not the least bit disturbing
So
to anybody.
scary.
And he just starts taunting him, and he grows a mouthful of razor blades and then bites down on his own lips, so he's mangling his face as he's taunting Ben. And and Ben is like, I am in a library full of children. The last thing I can do is scream.
In the middle of the day. We talked about this last episode. The fact that it can show up in the middle of a day in a crowded space is so scary because there is no safe place in Derry.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he ends up transforming into Dracula, which inadvertently clicks in Ben's head. He kept talking about those silver dollars, what'd they do for them, and he realizes that they used them as slugs. And then some strange man at the library starts talking to him about it, which was very weird.
Well, to foreshadow, well, not foreshadow, I guess, because we've already talked about it, but to support that it's really faith, because what they tried to do did not actually work the way they thought it did. They just believed it did.
Yeah.
I love the way that quote unquote magic works in this book. The fact that it is all based on belief is such a cool idea. I just love it.
It's awesome.
I would be dead if I were Ben right now. All Pennywise would have to do is say, CM, I have a rare book up here I'll give to you. And I would have been climbing those steps.
No, thank you.
I figured the mouthful of razor blades because it's almost like shaving the inside of your mouth.
First
I think
of
I just
all,
made CM throw up in her brain.
I hate that you thought of that and you said it and that I've never thought of it, but now it exists within me. All right. Moving on. Stephen King does some baseball stuff.
He does love. We got to revisit the Tracker Brothers, though.
Yeah,
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, we were just there in
And
Dreamcatcher.
it references all the kids wiping away the dirt so they could look at the Playboy, not Tina Schlossinger's pussy.
Thank goodness.
This time.
I have to admit, I was like, yeah, whatever, baseball, because I don't really care about sports very much.
But you love a crazy old man?
No, I loved when this felt like a cartoon, when the baseball mats, what do you call the bases, started flying out at Eddie, because he's remembering not playing baseball as a kid, but watching others play, because that's just super duper sad. And there were 2 balls hit just out of the field.
But Butch Huggins, I believe, or
Belch.
maybe Belch, right? Of course, hit a ball so hard that it exploded and unraveled and went out into the barrens. And as he's thinking about that, the ball flies out of the barrens and lands like in his hand.
He catches it, like it bounces and he catches it.
And just as that's happening, like Bugs Bunny.
Yes. Yep. It reminded me of the movie Dreamcatcher when the buttworm is under the snow.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and Belch is attached to the other end of that ball, and he comes up, and then he's changing into, then he's the leper. It's even grosser than he was the first. I was like, oh yeah, this leper thing's horrible. This is even worse. And then he changes briefly into someone Eddie had a crush on when he was little.
Yeah.
Greta Bowie.
Yeah.
He had been thinking that like he didn't want to run into her in person because, oh, how depressing would it be to see a woman with gray hair? What? And then he sees that she is dead from a car crash, and no one in Derry truly dies.
Ooh.
This section has a moment that is stuck in my head forever from this book. And it is the description of when it vanishes. And the description is that there's a pop because of all the air rushing in to fill the space that matter once existed. And that has haunted me for eternity.
Yup. That image has been with me since high school. Like the thought of people like
This is what we talk about on our podcast when we do interviews. This is a Stephen King moment.
100%.
A phrase that
this whole
just...
chapter. This whole chapter is Stephen King moments chapter, because every single one of these, weirdly enough, specifically Bev's, which is next, right?
Yeah. I really like Bev's.
I've always remembered, and
Me
I think
too.
maybe it's also part of the miniseries, because the scene in the miniseries is also pretty unpleasant.
I'm going to go on record as saying, and I'm never going to change this statement, what we come up on, this is the worst thing I've ever read in my entire life.
It sucks.
It's horrible and I hate it. But I have an important question about this scene. So Bev finds her way back home, rings a doorbell. It's a little old lady. She thought it said Marsh. It said Darsh or something.
Kirsch.
Kirsch. I could not remember Kirsch. Do you guys think that Pennywise is just lonely? He pretends to be his own daughter. And he also says, as the daughter, as himself, I can't remember quite, that he is from a dying race on a dying planet, which is obviously a reference to something else, but maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe he's just super lonely.
That is something interesting, because she has tea with this little old lady, and the little old lady turns into a witch.
So slowly and in such a way that I think this is the best tension building scene in a book like that you've ever seen on paper. It is
It's so
amazing.
It is single-handedly the best scene in It Chapter 2 also. They do a great job of transitioning this scene.
Yeah, it's such a good scene, because once the transformation happens and she realizes that she may have drank shit, the witch starts spouting some truths about Bev's dad that we can just skip over, because
It's everything you think it is.
it is.
No, it's worse.
It is
It
worse.
is so explicit.
There is a lot of subtext that just plain old becomes text.
Yeah.
It's pornographic.
It is pornographic.
100%.
The taunting of what Bev's dad wanted is awful. I don't even want to.
Yeah. Okay, well,
Also, she might have drank poop.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she definitely
for sure
drank
drank
some shit.
poop.
Let's lighten the mood a little bit with another
Yeah.
question. Very important. Do you think that when Pennywise is about to like sneak up on a kid and he's picking his character that he is going to portray, do you think he ever gets sick of things? Like he's peeking into their brains. He's like, oh, another vampire? God.
Eternity's a long time. You're going to get bored.
Right?
Well, I mean, that's why he sleeps so much, I think. Keep from getting bored. Now, I have... Man, I'm not going to be able to talk about this. I'm going to tease it. I have a real hot take about Pennywise that I have to save to the end, because something we might read might completely disprove it and I'll sound like an idiot. I gotta
You
take.
can't sound like an idiot
I
on
have
this
to.
show.
I gotta wait. I gotta wait.
Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about Richie. He still thinks that he never had an encounter on his own with it, that he just had a funny dream in the middle of the day one day. We're flashing back to find out that this all started with getting chased by Henry and his friends, of course. And he runs through this department store. He hides in the toy section. He eludes them, which is great. And then he comes to the city center and sits on a park bench. And his eyes are stinging again as Richie's remembering this. And it's like something to do with some smoke and Mike when they were kids. Something happened. We got to wait for that.
This is one of my favorite parts in the book.
It's really cool. I kind of get why he thinks it's a dream, because I've had dreams where to this day I'm like, I know that was a dream, but it felt like it wasn't. And I didn't know it wasn't a dream until someone proved me wrong. It's weird.
So in the 50s timeline, because he's doing the same thing in both timelines. He's just sitting on a bench in city center. And there's this huge, tacky, plastic Paul Bunyan statue in the middle of town, which is a real thing in Bangor, Maine. And I would love to go there. But after he loses the bullies, he sits down and thinks, well, at that point, I must have fallen asleep. Because the next thing I know, my eyes were closed and I felt a rush of air blow my hair back. And when he opens his eyes, there is a Paul Bunyan head just in his face. I can see this so clearly. I just love the scene. It's described so fantastically. It's such a cool action scene.
Yeah.
And it's just surreal.
Oh, yeah, so surreal. And we've talked about how so many of the forms that it takes are things that kids would be afraid of, like movie monsters.
Or just classic, monsters. But Paul Bunyan, a big Paul Bunyan statue, is out of left field.
It's definitely very weird, but like you were saying, I can see this in my mind's eye so clearly. Like you're like in the sun and you're relaxing and you open your eyes, and then eyes that are the size of twice your body, bloodshot, are staring into your soul. How would you not lose your mind?
I think I just have a fear of anything that is that big.
Yeah.
Like if I saw anything moving that was the base that it's standing on is 6 feet high.
Yeah.
This thing is a literal giant, and that's terrifying.
Richie's a small guy, right? Richie's not very big also. I think that's why he talks about being so quick, is that he's small, he'd get his ass kicked. So maybe that is an underlying fear, like because something so much bigger than him really gets him because he's already kind of a tiny dude.
Yeah.
It's so fucking cool. And then it all happens again.
And then immediately he's daydreaming about this, and then he opens his eyes, and Paul Bunyan's fucking standing there.
It's fucking great. I love it.
Is his the only one that doesn't leave a lasting evidence that he can still see, like that they can still see?
Yeah, I guess it doesn't, because it splits a bench in half and knocks a bunch of stuff over with its enormous axe. And then once he runs away, he looks back and everything's fine. So,
although I guess Beverly's was an illusion, but kind of in a different way, because she thought she was walking up to a normal residence and it was all falling apart when she escaped.
Yeah.
Man, Bill lucked out.
all of
It seems unfair.
it really does.
Super lucky that his brother died. And that is...
That is not what I was saying.
He did all of his trauma as a kid. He can get an okay
He gets a
round.
pass this time.
Yeah,
Okay.
he gets a setup round this time.
Oh wait, Josh, tell us after Bill inappropriately talks to a strange child.
I just love the image of Bill going to the sewer where Georgie died, looking down the sewer and being like, "Fuck you," and that's pretty much the scene.
King protagonists love talking to random kids.
They do.
This did remind me of the Tommyknockers when Guard talks to Jack on the beach.
Yeah.
He's just like a drunkard that's just spent the night on the beach, and he wanders up to a child and he's like, "Hey, what's up? We're friends now."
Yeah.
That's
No, he has this conversation with this kid, and it's great. But the kid appropriately keeps his distance and is very aware of him, which is great. And the kid's about to leave, and he's like, "Hey, you ever heard any voices from the drain?" And the kid's like, "Oh fuck, yeah, actually, I've heard some voices. That I've heard some kids' voices in my drains and everything." And
yeah, he says he was afraid to take the drain out because there was a little girl crying.
yeah. God, it's
nope.
disgusting. Nope. And before they part ways, Bill's like, "Hey, stay away from sewers and drains, pal, and you'll be all right." And I do love that the kid is they're talking about weird stuff, and the kid says, "I know a kid who saw Jaws at Bassey Park."
That I wish we got more of that, because I would love, because it's 1980 what? In
4 or 5.
84. I want to hear a kid that sees Michael Myers.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Not Freddy Krueger, I don't think existed yet. But when did the first Nightmare on Elm Street come out?
I think it was out by
82?
Yeah, how did we not get fucking Freddy and Jason showing up?
Too expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They spent all their money on that Rodan. But he then meets another child. He goes 2 for 2 talking to kids.
There are adults that he could have talked to.
But this girl, he's like, "What's your favorite place? What's your favorite store?" And she says, "Secondhand rose, secondhand clothes." And he's like, "All right, I'm gonna do what this small girl says." And he goes and he sees Silver. Silver is in this secondhand shop. And that's what our first instance of he thrusts his fists against the posts and still insists he sees the ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "That's in my head. I don't know what the fuck it means, but it's here."
Not just in his head. It almost like undoes him.
Yeah.
He's he walks in, tries to buy the bike. He wants to ask how about Silver because of course he needs his old bike.
Right.
But before he can say a word, basically, this phrase enters his head and it wipes out all other thought and almost causes this pawn shop owner to call the cops on him.
We find out later through Mike, this was a phrase that Bill was trying to learn when he was a kid. And through all of this stuff that happened with his family and the coldness of his parents, this was a thing he felt, if I can just spit this out perfectly without stuttering, like the prince kissing the princess. and
It'll
picking her
heal
up.
my family.
Yeah, my mom will love me again.
Made me sick to my
basically.
stomach.
Yeah, that. Ugh. So he buys Silver and he calls up Mike and asks if he has a place he can store it. So he goes to Mike's house and ends up working on it in the garage using a bike repair kit and stuff that Mike just happened to pick up, even though he doesn't have his own bike.
Yeah, when he calls Mike to tell him, like, "Hey, I found something. Can I keep it at your house?" He immediately knows. It's Silver, isn't it? Which is
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
really cool.
It shows more of Mike being a part of this than we've gotten so far. Because we haven't even, for us, we're about to, but he hasn't come together with our other group as kids. So we are going to take a break from our main characters. I think this section, the 3 uninvited guests, is fascinating. And I read it and I listened to it a couple times just because it was so good. First, we are going to start with Henry Bowers, who's been locked up at Augusta and then Juniper Hill for the murders in the 50s, including his father. And the day after Mike made all the calls, Henry started hearing voices from the dark side of the moon, which is so metal. I love it so much. And Henry is horrible and he should be locked up forever for the stuff that we're going to see him do later, but he did not commit the murders.
Well, not all of them.
Well,
he does say that he did murder his dad.
Right, not the 3. Like, there's
Not the
reasonable
other kids.
explanations for what they find, evidence they find to support him killing his friends, but there's something else that was placed in his room that he didn't put there, but he knows who did. Like, he has the most, it reminds me, his relationship with Pennywise reminds me of Gaunt and Ace Merrill. a little bit.
Yes.
See,
Not as
there
direct,
are a
but-
few things that reminded me of the El Cuco and fucking what's his face, Cancer Boy.
Oh yeah, in
Yeah.
The Outsider.
Mhm.
Yeah, that too.
Because there are several times where in talking to Bowers, it uses as a threat, how about I point at you and give you lung cancer?
Yeah.
And he knows that he could.
For sure.
Yeah. He also, we find out that he has been sleeping with the nightlight on. since
Great
he's-
detail.
Yeah, and it's just that it's like these Disney characters.
And that's how he
Chill
counts
house
his time is by
Mhm.
burned out nightlights. Fucking great.
So on this night, 2:04 a.m., his nightlight goes out and his pal Vic shows up.
It's so great. Just he hears the voice from under his bed and he's like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. And then Vic, like, hands on the rails, pulls himself out from under the bed.
Ugh.
Oh.
We also skipped over, we don't have to go into it, but another reason I love this section is because it is a classic King litany of terrible things chapter.
Yes.
Because it goes through all of the other, or several of the other inmates at Juniper Hill
Yes.
and just recounts the things that they did. Serve no purpose to the story. It's just King had a bunch of really terrible ideas and was like, man, I gotta tell someone that this guy ate his mom's brain.
Well, it sets the mood for this chapter really well. It makes it feel kind of grimy and gross and terrifying.
Yeah.
It's visceral.
It
Very.
really is.
But it basically makes a pact with him and is, hey, I'm going to get you out of here because those people who did you wrong before, they're back.
And he's hearing their voices taunting him.
And so it gets him out, and then the guard sees a clown suit with a dog head, and that's the last we see of this guy.
A Doberman pinscher's head on a clown's body.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
Fucking great.
Very scary.
Yeah. And then we get to Rose Matter.
Yes. Yeah. We are with Kay, Beverly's friend, and so Kay gets paid a visit by Tom, who pretends to be a flower delivery guy, to get her to open the door because he
Oldest
called.
ruse in the book.
He called and he's like, "Hey, have you heard from her, seen my wife?" And she's like, "No, I haven't talked to her in 2 weeks." And very quickly, it's like, "Ooh, we got to pretend that you're concerned about her." Tom's a smart guy, and he picks up on that, so he shows up, beats the fucking shit out of her to get her to spill the beans and tell him that Beverly went back to Derry. And in his mind, he thinks this has something to do with Bill Denbrough because of that book and a movie he saw where that guy's wife looks a lot like my wife. Very quickly summarizing this, but
Yeah.
I did want to talk about Kay. Seems like she feels very guilty, and you would feel
It's-
guilty no matter what for giving up your friend. But Tom threatens to cut her face, and she keeps saying, he threatened to cut my face." It's like,
Cut off her face, not just cut her face.
cut into her face with the shard of glass. But I don't think anybody would be like,
No.
"Go
No.
for it, man." I just felt so bad that it seemed like she was feeling guilty, like, "Oh, I gave her up for vanity." No.
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 Having your face cut up or off is very reasonable excuse to.
Yeah, it's so terrible because, yeah, I mean, I would feel the guilt too, but it's completely like you have to do what you gotta do.
You would have
right?
killed her.
Yeah.
And then she gets the moment when she's on the phone with information to get all of the numbers in Derry.
I love
that,
this.
Like, it's such a great, and when she explains it to the other person, and then they just start listing them off. Like, no combating it. It's one of those moments, like we talked about with all of the evil characters and all the evil people we meet around Derry. When you see somebody do something really good, it hits. And that's that moment.
Yep. So she finds out where Beverly's staying, and she leaves a message with the clerk, like, "Hey, you have to tell her no matter what time it is, call me right away," because Beverly, of course, is out at that moment. And then we find out that Tom, not far behind Beverly at all. He arrives like the next day, I think, in Derry, and he's staying at a motel. And unfortunately, for our third uninvited guest, adjacent to his is another motel, and that is where Audra is staying.
Yeah, when Audra, who quits the movie that she was working on, basically tells the director, like, I have to go, and it's hinted that she's going to be blackballed,
Yeah,
basically.
it's interesting, her dynamic with the director, too, because, like, she knows this is not cool to do, and he's like, I'm not going to blacklist you, but it's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm not going to
if you
protect
do
you
this.
either.
Yeah, he's very kind to her.
Yeah, but very realistic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And I appreciated that. He wasn't a jerk. He didn't yell. I love Audra. I think I'm going to be real pissed at Bill in a little bit.
I don't remember what happens with Audra exactly, and I'm not emotionally ready.
You're not emotionally ready. So she arrives actually about the same time Tom does, or
An
a little
hour
bit
ahead
before
of him because
Yeah.
she gets the last rental car.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's so fun. Yeah, so these two people are in Derry now.
Parked nose
Nose
to
to
nose.
nose.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
scary. Because
God.
she doesn't know who he is, but he knows.
Mm-hmm.
They
Yeah.
go out to the cars at the same time, and he's
Oh,
gonna.
fuck, I didn't even think about that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because
Oh,
he
Jesus.
knows that she's married to Bill.
Fuck.
Okay, now we're gonna go back in time. As we talked about, we find out that we cap things off with this monstrous sacrifice that happens. But that's not only needed at the end of the cycle. We have to begin with that as well. So we are going to learn about the Bradley gang, which we don't have to spend a ton of time on.
It's such a cool
love
It
segment.
is. I'm a sucker for like a whole town just going vigilante and just like
Yeah.
taking matters into their own
And
hands.
I love gangster stuff
Yeah.
too. King has a really good short story in Everything's Eventual that's about gangsters and their last holdup. And that reminds me of this.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Would one of you like to just summarize for our listeners why
Yeah.
this is important to the story?
Well, why it's important to the story is everyone in Derry's a piece of shit.
Yeah.
The Bradley gang, a group of bank robbers, kidnappers, and murderers, decided to hold up outside Derry. They thought that's where they'd be safe. They drive into town looking to buy a shit ton of ammo and are recognized by the owner of the gun shop immediately. And he's like, "Yeah, I can fill this order. Come back in 48 hours. It'll be great. I'll get it all."
It won't be suspicious.
And then proceeds.
Yeah, and it's a ludicrously large
so
order.
insane.
It's like 5,000 rounds of Tommy gun ammunition and stuff.
But I love that the way it's presented is this guy went around to everybody in town, everybody on Main Street, and was very casually like, "So at this exact time, the Brady gang is going to be coming through. Just in case you're around. Do you need any ammo, by the way, before I go?" It's so casual, and it's the drugstore owner that's telling
Yep.
Mr. Keene.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Keene is telling Mike all this about how technically nobody knows what happened. Nobody was around. The chief of police was off on a fishing trip, and nobody in town was there.
or people were like asleep when it
Yeah.
happened.
So conveniently, no one was anywhere near Main Street that day. But he says there were 50 to 60 people who had posted up around the road they would drive in on. And he says the whole street was dead silent. And he actually sees Zach Denbrough, who, as a kid, who notices how quiet it is and gets the fuck out of Dodge, which is great. And nobody shows up, but nobody gives up waiting. Everybody holds true, and then they come in, and then these 50 to 60 people just start firing
Light 'em up.
Yeah. Tear them up. They try to escape, and the cars get stuck together, and they can't. They're just blasting away. But here's what's funny. He saw a clown shooting the same kind of gun he had from over above this shop, whereas another guy saw him over by the church shooting the same kind of gun he had, and a third person also saw the clown shooting the same type of gun he had from somewhere else.
Which I think supports our idea that it takes what's there and makes it worse. Like when we're talking about Adrian Mellon being beaten to death, would it have been as gruesome without its influence over those guys? So it seems like he's definitely using the town.
For sure.
There's also something else here in that they go out of their way to point out that, first of all, they also say he's floating, of course. He was like hanging
image
out of a window.
It floating, hanging out of window out to its knees.
Yeah.
I imagined it
So-
like just completely horizontal. Yeah.
And going to mention that it casts no shadow, which is just a great detail about it that I love. But yeah, that's the Bradley gang.
Yeah. And we're going to move from that into the apocalyptic rock fight.
Yep, both of those things.
The apocalyptic fuck is later.
Oh my God. Why? Jesus Christ. Okay, so I know you guys are excited about this scene. Bill and Mike are at the library waiting for the others to arrive, and Bill is thinking about how it wasn't until Mike joined their group that they were complete. So now we are going to see Mike join the group, sort of like in these parallel moments of the rest of our gang playing out in the Barrens, and Henry and his pals, and Mike.
This was also where we get that that goes down the list of, well, Bill thought Henry hated him the most because of this. Ben thought he hated him the most, but actually he hated Mike the most. And that's when we find, like, he poisoned Mike's dog, and he's, like, chased, and, like, he knocked him in mud and shoved it in all of his orifices. And
I will say that this chapter, the action sequence is so triumphant and amazing.
yes,
It's great, but listening to the audiobook
Yep.
was rough because holy shit, they say the N-word like
Constantly.
300 times.
Jesus.
Yeah.
It was tough to listen to.
It's also like the fact that all of when Bowers abuses Mike, his dad gives him a beer and a congratulations afterwards, which just reinforces in no way does anything excuse or explain anything, but it kind of clicked one of the reasons that Bowers does use that word so much, like why he tries to be as hurtful as he can, because any bit of hurt he sees that as something that will earn his father's love.
I mean, I feel like it is
crazy.
a pretty realistic depiction of
Generational
generational racism.
Hands down.
What's
It's-
worse than that, though, because that's overt and you can see those fuckers coming a mile away. It's the Mike remembering a conversation he had with a classmate who's like,
that hurt me.
it's not a bad
Jesus.
word because my dad uses it and he goes
Yep.
to church like your dad and he uses it like it's a compliment.
Yeah.
And it's like Mike
Awful.
doesn't understand what he's feeling, but he's feeling implicit racism, and that kid doesn't get it. And he describes never feeling so like such a huge divide between him and someone else.
It's honestly fantastic writing about racism
Yeah.
for King. It is just rough to listen to
That word over and over and over.
and over
Yeah.
and over
Will-
again.
This is Will has said and done a lot of cool stuff when we've seen the moments we've seen
dad.
him. Yeah, Mike's
Yeah.
dad. But the moment that when he sits down with his wife talking about the incident and he basically says, you can't get away from being called these names and being treated differently because we're black. Not in my lifetime, at least. And it is like there was something neat about reading that we're not there yet. Obviously, as a society, we know we're not there yet, but we are the furthest we have ever been, and that is a cool marker to note that a character like Will from this time period
That is-
saying it'll never be my lifetime, but
That is
I don't know,
such a more optimistic viewpoint than I have, Josh.
I know.
The-
I was just thinking, and not in Mike's or ours.
Yeah, it's
One of us has to be optimistic. This would just be sad episode.
anyway.
Yeah.
July 3rd.
July 3rd. Mike is being chased by Henry and Belch and Chris and Peter, somebody like a kid from a better part of town
Yeah.
who
Which
thinks
is-
he's being cool and doesn't know how crazy Henry is getting.
Which is even scarier.
yes.
That there is just this normal guy with them. Because as Mike is being chased, he is even like, as it gets more and more dangerous for him, he thinks at one point, like, I have to go because something bad will happen. Not all of them will want it to happen, but it has gone too far. Something bad will happen. And that's so scary to think that just like Bowers' hatred spreads that easily. It's terrible.
He's like it.
Yeah.
Did you guys catch the Long Walk reference? There's
I don't think so.
reference. Stephen King hit a reference to The Long Walk in here when they see Mike, and he's like, "Let's chase and get him," and he's like, "No, let's walk and close the distance. He hasn't noticed us yet." As they get closer, somebody sees them and says that it looked like they were training for that peculiar Olympic walking competition.
So the long
These
walk.
five boys.
No, I think that's what. I think that's just the biathlon, bud.
This image of seeing five boys walking at a fast speed.
This
Like,
is one of
that's
the
what,
most
like, it made me
intense
think of.
walking scenes that we've read since The Long Walk.
Yeah.
So I'll give it to you.
Yeah,
And
because
a
I was
fart
trying.
gives it all away.
I was trying to make sense of how the long walk and it were in the same universe. Is like I want it to work, but I don't think it does.
I was like, does Bauer want to fuck his mom? Like, what are you talking about?
I wouldn't be surprised. That would not even be as bad as some of the other stuff we've had to endure.
As the chase goes, Mike ends up like scaling a fence to get away. And at this point, like, they've caught up to him a couple times, and like, so he's lost a shoe. He took off his shirt to load up some ammo so that he could fight him off.
When they have firecrackers and M80s.
The way that they set up the M80s is so good because they're like, they were setting up to just play with firecrackers. And they even like, they set up that he has exactly 4 M80s, which is just great. Great, because once the fight starts, or the chase starts, you have it in the back of your mind. Oh, this dude has explosives.
Yeah.
And there's a lot in this section too about all of these different decisions that are going to bring everybody together at exactly the right moment. Circumstances present that made them all make choices they wouldn't typically make. Because as Mike is being chased, we're going to leave him for a minute and go with our group who also have firecrackers.
Yeah.
And they want to set him off at the dump. And they make their way there in like the cutest play imaginative scene.
One of my favorite parts also, Bill just leading them and without discussing it, just it goes into this very perfectly childlike play of jungle exploration and just like turns to Bev and is like, hey, be careful. And Bev immediately latches on and says, oh, I know there are piranhas in the river. And it's so endearing and heartwarming until Eddie sees the piranhas.
Yeah. Which supports the shark thing from earlier, even though it's in a different timeline.
It's another thing that, like, as cool as it is that Bill's like, oh, be careful, there are tigers in here. I was like, you are going up against a shape-shifting monster. Don't give it ideas.
Well, and we know it was watching them.
Yeah, there's a scene where there's something in the Morlock.
Yeah, the
Morlock holes.
Yeah.
And something with 2 foot across eyes.
Paul Bunyan.
For some reason, that doesn't seem as scary then. So they're going to the landfill, but the guy who runs it is there. And I love how he always asks, are you kids nice?
Yeah.
Aren't
Are
you
you
nice
nice?
kids? Yeah, and he's screaming at them because he can't hear very well, not because he's mean. He's like, nice kids don't play in the dump. Go to the library. So they leave the dump and they end up in this like rock quarry area, which happens to be where Mike is running to. And they're going to do some stuff. And all of a sudden Bill's like, stop, pick up the biggest rocks you can find, get ready. Okay,
So fucking great.
one of you just explain this scene of when Mike bursts through this area.
So at this point, Mike has he's rolled down a ravine. Again, no shirt, one shoe. And he is trying to find a path to get away. Meanwhile, Bowers, hot on his tail, is simply running straight through the brush, getting torn up along the way, but he is closing in. And the losers have heard the M80s go off earlier and have noticed it, but Mike pretty much tumbles into the gravel pit, and when he looks up, there are 6 kids standing at the top of a ridge just looking at him.
Fucking gunslinger moment,
Yeah.
man.
Hell yeah.
Ass.
And he specifically says, it's like they were waiting for me. He gets that feeling, and he gets up, he gets to his feet, and he joins them, and then we have all 5 bullies who have lined up at this clearing and all 7 losers at the top of this rock pile, and then all hell breaks loose, and it's amazing. Just the fact that Henry basically says, hey, I've tracked down and tormented all of you, give me that one, and we'll be fine. Just think nothing of it. Give me that kid and walk away. And their response is to throw rocks.
Well, yeah, they're like, absolutely not. And then even Ben is trying to tell Beverly, hey, maybe you should go like hide, basically. And she's like,
He's
fuck
like,
that.
I just, Henry never learns that charging head first into any situation does not do him any good. Every time he does it, something bad happens, but
And it's usually Ben Hanscom kicking his ass.
Ben he gets knocked to the ground, and Ben's like up on him, and Henry pulls out the M80, lights it, and throws it up into Ben's face, and Ben just like a volleyball player slaps it back down.
It's so good.
And Henry's reaction is, I didn't think he could do that. As though Bowers thought that was against the rules.
There's a lot of that's against the rules, and you're not being fair, letting me kick your ass.
Yeah, the normie kid who's already like, oh, this is not for me.
Yeah.
But he's also like, when chasing them, yelling out like, hey, come on, man. Like they're still playing a game and they haven't been whipping rocks at each other for a while.
I also thought it was interesting. Vic is the only one who recognizes what's happening with Henry and also is bothered by it, because Belch and Chris are kind of described as big lugs who just don't. They just follow whatever everyone tells them to do. But Vic, even though he's like, oh, this is getting weird, I don't like this, he still participates. And because he is so calm and he's not like, it's not emotional for him, he doesn't even want to be there.
Mm-hmm.
He fights better than Henry and anyone else.
Because
he does the most damage after going, rock fights are really dangerous. Kids get hurt.
But they manage to fend them all off one by one. They all retreat and leave Bowers by himself. They stand together, all 7, for the first time in victory, as Bowers tucks tail and starts crying and runs away.
And they tell him, this is our place.
Yeah. Do not come back to the Barrens. Off limits.
One of my other favorite parts was where, I think it was Vic, again, hits Bill. And the look on Bill's face makes him think, I wanted to say, I take it back, but you can't say that to a little kid in front of your buddies.
So the part where near the end, where it is Bill and Bowers, right? Mm-hmm. Where Bowers is like ducking and dodging, and Bill is not. He is taking rocks to the chest and fastball pitching at Bowers. It rules.
Big Bill getting it.
Big Bill.
God, it's just so cool. It is even better by the fact that when the bullies leave, the 7 of them are standing there, and it's this moment they all feel we're together. Mm-hmm. And whatever that means, it starts now. And then Stan goes, you guys still want to light some firecrackers?
It's so great.
It's immediately they're all back to like, this problem's handled. Now, like, we're 7 best buds now. It's all so seamless.
Yeah, Mike's like, hell yeah, I do. It's really beautiful the way that them clicking into place. I loved that they were waiting for Mike to arrive this whole time and they had no idea. It's just so sweet.
That's it for this episode of Derry Public Radio. As always, thank you for listening, and join us for our next episode where we will be covering chapters 14 through Derry, the 4th interlude. For CM Alexander and Benjamin Graham, I'm Joshua Kahn reminding you, Derry didn't much give a shit if any of them lived or died.
Hey everyone, CM Alexander here. Thank you for listening to It Part 2. We hope you enjoyed it. And thank you to our patron, Rachel Jansen, for making this her pick. And once again, here's Josh with a message about his balls.
Hey everyone, it's Josh back again to talk about our It series sponsor, Manscaped. Thanksgiving is in the past, and that means even if you're fighting it off, Christmas is coming. If your partner is still asking for something you want under the tree or stuffed in your stocking, Manscaped has got you covered with the Performance Package 4.0. It includes the signature Lawnmower 4.0, the Crop Preserver and Crop Reviver, which is an anti-chafing ball deodorant, moisturizer, and toner, plus a pair of Manscaped anti-chafing boxers that'll keep your junk feeling fresh all day long. I never really thought of myself as someone who would pay as close attention to my balls as Annie Wilkes pays to Paul Sheldon's books, but after a few weeks of using these products, I'm stunned at how confident and fresh I feel. And the best part about asking for this now is that they know they're getting you a gift you'll both love. And with our offer code saving them money too, they're sure to be your #1 fan. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code DERRY at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code DERRY. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped.
That's all for now, listeners. Goodbye.